Hello and welcome to Dialogue. Chinese President Xi Jinping and the Russian President Vladimir Putin have joined the opening ceremony of the two countries' nuclear energy cooperation project via video link. What's the nature of the project and what will it mean for each country? And in Russia-U.S. relations, the Russian State Duma on Wednesday approved the denunciation of the Treaty on Open Skies. This follows the U.S. departure last November. To find out why Russia is withdrawing and what the implications are, I'm joined by Anna Tangin, independent current affairs commentator, Pavel Felgenhauer, Russian defense analyst, Professor Liu Baocheng at the University of International Business and Economics, and later by Peter Kuznick, Professor of History at American University. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. So, Baocheng, let me start with you. This year marks this 20th anniversary of the signing of the Treaty of Good Neighborliness, Friendship and Cooperation between China and Russia. Now, today, basically, we are seeing heads of states from both nations appearing at this signing ceremony, groundbreaking for the project. So what is the significance of this online meeting between the two leaders?
Well, China-Russian cooperation has a great significance in terms of the geopolitical issue that is hovering around the globe, and more realistically, it helps China's energy sufficiency and also energy security. And in the meantime, it provides the right type of capital that is critically needed by Russia. So we have engaged in an all-around type of cooperation, particularly in the area of energy, and now the nuclear signing ceremony is signifying that we have continued and deepened the collaboration between these countries, given its the complementarity in terms of the technology know-how and also in terms of the economic structure. And this also helps to boost China's the confidence in achieving the carbon peaking and carbon neutrality goal that is set forth by our central government, and also the pave the right way for a all-around cooperation, be it nuclear, be it the power grids, and also the equipment cooperation, and not to mention the pipelines of natural gas that we have already been under operation.
Pavel, from Moscow here, what's the response to this, basically another step in terms of cooperation between China and Russia? Response from the public, response from the media?
Well, it's been, of course, a very, very positive response from all sides. This is good business. This is not just simply Russia exporting natural resources. This is exporting technologies, and in a field of nuclear energy field, where Russia is very much on the world level, but sees itself as being kind of ostracized in the Western markets. There was just recently the Czech Republic decided that Russian Rosatom will not take part in a tender to improve a nuclear power plant in the Czech Republic, and so China, a big deal with China boosts the Russian nuclear industry, and it also shows that Russia is still very much a powerhouse in this sphere. And also it's because it's not just simply money, it's not just simply commercial interest, it's also strategic, and with Russia again and having all those problems, not only with the U.S. but with the American allies, having such close and friendly relationship with China is very important. So it's a win-win in all situations.
Well, Anna, this agreed construction of these 4 reactors at the 2 nuclear plants in China, the largest nuclear energy cooperation projects between China and Russia. We know the nuclear, cooperation requires basically the advanced technology, requires political trust in each other. How significant is the project for both nations, at the same time, for example, for China, in terms of the fight against the climate change?
Well, for Russia, it's extremely important. I mean, this is really the first major technology exchange that they have signed with a country outside the USSR, kind of sphere of influence. The fact that they're doing with China at this point is really, it displays this kind of tale of two cities. You have Washington and Beijing. You have smiles and handshakes, $270 billion in oil sales, a pending natural gas deal that's also between China and Russia. You have a space program there, and you have deepening technology and manufacturing cooperation. That's not the situation that's going on with Washington, where the Lavrov and Blinken are exchanging red lines over an anticipated but not yet settled conference between Putin and Biden.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bolton, previously there is a concern, let's say, about China-Russia cooperation, say, somehow it's limited to military technology and military sales, weapon sales to China, for example, and the oil and gas sector, as you mentioned earlier. But people say there's a need to expand the cooperation to reinforce this relationship of cooperation between the two countries. Are we seeing an expanded cooperation between Beijing and Moscow here?
Yes, definitely. We began with the collaboration in military technology and equipments, and then gradually shift the focus more on energy collaboration. Now it's energy-related technology cooperation because Russia is highly dependent on the export of natural gas and oil. And now, as our Russian friend has mentioned, this is really a new format of collaboration without the, merely extracting the natural resources out of Russia. And right now, we also see that China and Russia has maintained the over $100 billion US trade over the past few years. And despite of the difficulties, we have encountered over the COVID-19 in last year, this trade record has maintained relatively satisfactory. And now with border trades, with the more added value in not only the energy, but also the petrochemicals. And now the people are talking about the import, the technology together with the coal from Russia. So now we also have seen that there is a lot more potential for collaboration in the agricultural area, and more Chinese business and the farming companies are looking at the Far East to cultivate the land in collaboration with the local people. So it's all around, and of course, e-commerce has been booming, particularly during the last year difficult time.
Mm-hmm. Bochum, at the same time, of course, China and Russia, they share similar or sometimes identical views on many international issues, geopolitical, let's say. And both nations have their problems with the United States and pressure, let's say, from the West in general. So you mentioned about the potential for cooperation of the two countries. In the geopolitical sense, so is that the same situation?
Well, we have the same concern, but we also need to further deepen our trust. And China did come up as a white knight during the sanction imposed by the Western countries over Russia, with large checks written for energy collaboration. And of course, both countries are looking to diversify their trading partners. So take the energy, for example. Russia does not really want it to solely depend on Europe, so they shift to China. And they do not only want to depend on China in the Far East, but also they also want to spread to South Korea, to Japan, and many others, ASEAN countries, etc. So China is doing the same to diversify our source of energy supply from the Middle East to to Africa, to Latin America, and now now Russia. So they both have their own political agenda, but we are able to synchronize some of the geopolitical objectives. And now we are also there to touch ground on the reality that both countries can really benefit from this, a large amount of cooperation. So now it is up to more to the Chinese businesses, so to be motivated to work further along this line now that the political leaders are highly committed.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, thank you, Boycheng, first. And now we turn to this latest developments in Russia-U.S. relations. We know Russian President Vladimir Putin, May 11th, submitted legislation to the parliament to formalize a Russian exit from the Open Skies Treaty. The Russian State Duma today approved the denunciation of the treaty. So, Pavel, why now? Is this the timing scheduled, maybe scheduled ahead of this two foreign ministers meeting on the same day today, and also a possible summit between President Putin and President Biden?
Well, this vote in the Russian Duma, it's a bit more of a formality. This is an internal Russian thing. Basically, from the point of view of international law, it doesn't matter how the Russian parliament votes, as long as Russia actually sends the notes of notification that it's leaving the treaty, and it hasn't done that yet. That will happen after the upper house will also vote. So somewhere on 2nd of June, apparently, Russia will send out the notes. And then their 6 months waiting period begins. And so by December, legally speaking, Russia will leave the treaty. But again, that's also a bit of a formality, since the treaty, from the Russian point of view, is not working already. Russia, from at least the beginning of the year 21, has been refusing to accept open sky missions, quoting the COVID pandemic. But anyway, the treaty right now is more dead than alive. And of course, Russia has been kind of prolonging the period of its leaving the treaty, because the United States last year just simply they announced, they sent out the notes, and in last November they formally went out. Right now, Russia is kind of prolonging it because Moscow knows that the American allies, many of them, are very upset with the United States leaving the treaty and the treaty collapsing. It's very important for them, much less important for the Pentagon. So Russia is hoping that there will be more pressure from American allies on this issue. But if the United States does not return, apparently it's not the official, again, the Biden administration has not said about that. That it's just simply leaving. The treaty ends, and it's more or less ends already right now. Mm-hmm. It's already not really functioning.
Right. Peter, obviously many blame, fairly, should be placed on the former administration of Trump, basically, which, decided to leave the treaty last November. And now, what about the views of the Biden administration? Is there any possibility for the government to somehow to return to the treaty, which is an important document in terms of the arms control?
There was a lot of hope that Biden would reverse Trump's decision, and there was reason to be optimistic. Biden condemned Trump for withdrawing from that treaty. He said he supported it always as a senator in his long years in the Senate. He said it was very important in terms of transparency and openness and trust in terms of arms control and information. So people expected that he was going to reverse Trump's decision. However, as in other things, Biden has unfortunately doubled down on many of Trump's policies, and in some ways has become even more aggressive and hostile toward Russia than Trump was. So Biden, our optimism was misplaced, unfortunately. But the United States announced that it was retiring the planes that were being used to conduct the surveillance, and that the United States was not going to renew the treaty, which is very, very unfortunate. Russia had said they were willing to go along with it, and they gave certain conditions that made sense to them, that the allies would not share information with the United States, and that they would be allowed to overfly U.S. bases in Europe. It was an important treaty, and those of us in the arms control community are very disappointed to see it come apart like this.
Mm-hmm. Tangen, here, with both the biggest power, basically, here, Russia and the United States withdrawing from this treaty, that means the treaty will collapse naturally. So what is the, ramification, let's say, about the two countries and also in European continent?
Well, you're increasing the chances of distrust, and something happened, the assumption that somebody has something right now. And what I mean by that, the whole point of the flyovers was to make sure that there was verification and that it was mutual, and this would, settle down any kind of suspicions that people had, because they could actually see with the eyes of their planes. Now you have a situation where the trust has been broken. There are a whole host of issues, from the Antarctic to accusations against Putin personally, against Russian hackers who are alleged to have gone against the United States, both at the State Department and also during the election. So there are so many different issues out there. Unfortunately, it's all going in a bad direction. And that's why it's very hard to see how these countries are going to achieve a reset. And instead, as we talked about earlier, you see Russia and China and those countries that are opposed to the U.S. gathering together basically to do mutual support.
Mm-hmm. Pavel, the two foreign ministers, Mr. Lavrov and Mr. Blinken, they are scheduled to meet each other at on the sidelines of this Arctic Council. So there's you can expect a lot to be touched upon. For example, Arctic area, whether the United States has been basically accusing Russia for militarizing this region, Ukraine and the Nord Stream 2, etc. A lot of issues. So what do you expect? Anything to be resolved between the two ministers over there?
Well, if not resolved, at least the positions will become more clear. And of course, their main kind of task of the Secretary of State and the Russian Foreign Minister, is to prepare the coming summit between Biden and Putin in June, which Russia tacitly agreed to, but not yet officially agreed to. So basically, this treaty is a make or break point for the coming summit. Maybe it won't even happen. Maybe it will. If it doesn't happen, that's a very bad sign. If it does happen, well, that's at least a glimpse of some kind of hope. And they have a big agenda to talk about, to try and find some kind of points of agreement. Mm-hmm. Because right now it seems that Russia, Washington, and Moscow are on a collision course almost on everything. And that's a big problem, and it's not clear, will this meeting in Reykjavik really resolve issues or make them worse?
Well, obviously they don't see eye to eye on this Arctic region, because as the two foreign ministers, have their own press conference basically Monday and Tuesday, expressing their different opinions about how to move forward in this region. Russia says this is our territory, this is our land, we have been here for a long time. But Blinken seems to disagree with that. So they are both members of the Arctic Council. Can they solve or reach any agreement or a consensus inside this framework? Pavel?
Well, yes, Mr. Anthony Blinken, he already criticized Russian actions in the Arctic. Russia will not like that at all. But at least in the Arctic right now, the problem is not that pressing. I mean, Russia has a very robust presence there. It has the biggest fleet of icebreakers in the world. The Americans have only one icebreaker, and it's old and not fully functional. So the United States can talk about the need to open up the seas and of the free navigation, but it cannot really perform a kind of move through the entire Arctic on its own to send its ships, because its icebreaker, the only one it has, may break down in the process, and then they'll have to ask Russia to rescue their ships. So the United States does not right now have the muscle actually to perform intrusive freedom of navigation experiments in the Arctic, so it would be more exchange of words. That means the Arctic issue is still very contentious, but it is not the immediate one. Say Ukraine and some other things are much more urgent, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So, Peter, obviously we are not 100% sure whether there will be a summit between Biden and Putin next month, for example. But if there is one, so what will top of the agenda?
Well, both sides have talked about the need for further arms control agreements.
Sorry, Peter, please. Yeah.
So, further arms control agreements, certainly. The need for cooperation on the pandemic, the need for cooperation on climate change, the need for cooperation on the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, as well as on Korea. These seem to be areas in which there's a general consensus that we can work together and make some progress. So I think that would be a starting point. Getting back into the Open Skies Treaty would be a nice thing that we could work on together as well. The INF Treaty we could restore. One of the good things that's happened between the U.S. and Russia under the Biden administration was the extension of the New START Treaty. So that was a step in the right direction. But there are so many other crucial issues between us right now. Everybody was very concerned about what was happening with Ukraine. And there was a serious fear that there was going to be some kind of military confrontation there. But both sides seem to have backed off. The Russian side certainly has backed off in several different areas, and the United States has been sounding more conciliatory, less aggressive, less hostile in many of the statements recently. So there is some room for optimism right now, as opposed to a few weeks ago when the situation was actually seemed to be much more bleak than it is at the moment.
Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the Ukraine issue, of course, it's really about the management. It's very difficult to, say, fundamentally resolve the difficulties or the disagreements over, eastern part of Ukraine and over Crimea. And also Ukraine at the same time is seeking to join NATO to seek military protection from NATO or from the United States. But that will be unacceptable to Moscow. So is that the case in the probably near future, Peter?
The Ukraine issue is a non-starter. Zelensky was making certain statements about Ukraine wanting to join NATO. We know what happened last time when that was seriously raised. Back in 2008, George W. Bush said he wanted to expand NATO to include Ukraine and Georgia. And as the current head of the CIA, the former U.S. ambassador to Russia, Bill Burns, sent a secret memo back to Washington. Niet means niet, it was titled. He said, don't cross Russia's red lines when it comes to Ukraine joining NATO. And the situation is the same now. So if they want to see the conflict extended forever, make this a frozen conflict so that they would not be able to join NATO, then keep on talking like that. This is a very, very provocative, dangerous move on the part of Ukraine, and the ramifications would be terrible. I'm afraid if that ever did happen, then military conflict would be inevitable.
Mm-hmm. Well, Anna, here you mentioned earlier also about red lines. At least the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov talked about, we are going to mark our own red lines in terms of dealing with Washington over there. So Ukraine issue is obviously one of the issue, let's say. And also the two countries, they have this diplomatic war. For example, Russia had a list of unfriendly nations currently, the United States and Czech Republic among the list, let's say. So what's the development? What's the direction, let's say, for the two very big nations, nuclear powers over there?
Well, I don't think you can just look at it in isolation. You also have to factor in China. Everything that was said about what the United States wants to cooperate with Russia on are the same things that they want to cooperate with China on. Climate change, COVID, denuclearization. Yet at the same time, the United States is kind of crossing these red lines. For China, it's Taiwan and it's other territories within China, and for Russia, it is obviously Ukraine. So, you have the same things exactly happening, but now you have two people on one side. I mean, I'm reminded of, the old Chinese classics, The Tale of Three Kingdoms, where you have one strong kingdom, which is trying to push the other kingdoms, and they tend to come together strategically to fight off their stronger opponent. And that's what you see here. It's not possible, I don't think, for there to be any real progress until the U.S. accepts that it's in a multipolar world, that nations have the right to pursue the path to prosperity on their own terms, not the terms dictated by one nation. And until that happens, I still think that what Putin said in 2007 in Munich, where he decried the international order because it was rigged against what he saw as Russian interests, that will continue to be his view, and also perhaps the view in Beijing.
Mm-hmm. Well, Pavel, if you look at these foreign policy making in Washington, obviously this new administration of Biden stresses very much about value, about ideology. I mean, if you use value to define your relationship with Moscow or with Beijing, you would find a lot of trouble because say, oh, we have different system, we have different culture, different practices, then we are different. And the difference is we'll define this relationship. But if you are different, everything will be different. And how to cooperate with each other? What's the response from Moscow?
Well, Moscow is emphasizing that Russia should be treated as an equal, that it's not going to be sitting there as a bad pupil getting lectures from Washington, and just having a summit with Biden to agree to disagree is not apparently what Russia wants. Russia wants to see doesn't want the kind of relationship when we cooperate on something and on other issues Russia is being sanctioned. So Moscow wants a kind of real change in the attitude from the United States, and if that's not forthcoming, apparently there would be more and more tension building up.
Mm-hmm. Very briefly, Anna here. So, what do you see about the relationship basically Washington has with Moscow, with Beijing in the near future?
Well, it's not going to be good. I mean, Biden keeps insisting that, he's back at the head of the table and that he's leading the world, despite the fact that his country is in massive disarray, not only from COVID-19 and the economic effects thereof, but also politically. So it's a kind of post-hypocritical world in which he's saying that you should follow the U.S., but no one really wants to follow the example of what they see in the U.S. right now. He's putting in danger a lot of the gains that democracy has.
Well, we have to stop there. Thank you, Duncan. With that, we are coming to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. Again, you can also watch us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. You can find me on Twitter, Xu Qinduo in one word. Thanks for watching. See you next time.